Hi, welcome to LiTup 365, Autumn Session 3. This session is called It's Not Just Circulation. Last session we started this conversation about reciprocity, and I want to continue that conversation. I only just barely touched on it last time, and so I want to bring it into this conversation about circulation. So the definition of reciprocity is the practice of exchanging things with others for mutual benefit. So we tend to think of reciprocity as equal exchange, which it is, but we tend to think of equal exchange as give and take. We think it means if I give you this, you'll give me something in return. And we can't, it's really difficult for us to be sure, especially in personal relationships, that we are perceiving our exchange as equal. A great deal of issues in relationships comes in people thinking they are having equal exchange. I want to give an example of this with the concept of royalty. I remember I was working with someone once, and we were talking about that concept of royalty, and they were talking about, okay, you have these kings and queens and such that took from the poor, right? So they took taxes and sometimes lives, and you had to be in their militaries and things like that. And so this client I was working with, we talked about it, and I said, okay, so let's look at the pauper first. What do they give? And the answer was, well, they give everything. I mean, they have to give taxes, and they give their lives sometimes, and they have to live in service and do all this stuff for royalty. And I said, so then what is royalty by nature in that circumstance? And they're like, well, they take. And I said, well, do you think royalty thinks it takes? And they said, well, yeah, that's what they do. They take. And I said, well, not necessarily, because the royalty maybe takes the taxes, and they may build roads or aqueducts or armies, and the royalty probably thinks it gives as well. And I think if you look back on most of that dynamic, they do, right? For us, there's a lot of people now that feel like the government takes from them. And I'm betting the government often feels like the demands of the people are too high. So the problem with exchange when it's give and take is that we tend to assign the value to it that we assign its value, and then the other side may be assigning a different value. And this is where things can get a bit confusing. I don't think reciprocity works that way in nature. I think reciprocity in nature is more of a mirror. A mirror is an instant and equal exchange. Reciprocity happens in the moment. It happens simultaneously. So, for example, some people like to be givers and they don't like to receive because giving makes them feel like they have more. And so maybe they're not good at giving back. I knew someone once that was like this, always had to kind of one up you. When you give to them, they always had to give you something a little bit better. And I asked them once, how would it feel to you? How does it feel to you when you give? And they're like, it feels amazing. I'm like, well, can you give someone else the opportunity to have that feeling of being the one that gave a little more, that amazing feeling that you have, right? So we don't always realize that reciprocity is happening. When we give, we have a certain way we feel about it, and that determines its value. There's this concept I had about karma when I was looking at karma, and we tend to think of it as a cause and effect. And if somebody does something bad, like if somebody cuts me off in traffic, it's going to be like, oh, well, karma will get them. Actually, karma is already happening. If a person cuts me off in traffic, it says one of a multiple of things. One, it could be that they are insensitive and selfish, which says that they are a person that lives in their amygdala and so is therefore suffering. It could be that they're anxious and not paying attention. Again, they're in suffering. It could be that they're in an urgent matter. Maybe somebody is in danger. Again, you could potentially look at this as suffering. They're already in their karma. It's their karma that causes them to cut me off. So it's not about wishing karma on people, but realize that karma is already occurring to all of us. We're all in agreement at some level or another. Primates have this natural inclination to want to be better than another group. So my primate group has to be stronger than your primate group. That's natural. When we're no longer in that primal function, it's about being in homeostasis, being in balance, right? But if we're in the primal state, we'll always return to that balance, even if it's dysfunction, because it's familiar, right? And that's where we live in that state where we believe, oh, well, there must be a bad guy. And here's the issue. If you believe something, your subconscious mind will look for it and you will find it. If you believe there must be a bad guy, there will always be a bad guy. If you believe there must be a greater and lesser, there will always be a greater and lesser. When we start to look at the fact that abundance and grace are our natural state of being and not a measurement of our good, we can start to realize that everyone is in that state. We often want to be reminded that I am abundant, I am in grace. But what about realizing that everyone is in that natural state? Even if they're not functioning the way that we think they should function, what if we say, well, they're in their natural state of grace. They're living their karma. I'm living my karma. And when I can do that, when I can let go of where everyone else is, I can reconnect with the real question. Where is my value? Right? Where am I right now? How do I stay in my consciousness? Because then we can give what's growing within us. We're always doing this as we develop ourselves, right? It's balance. We exist in the world we create, which brings me to the conversation I want to have about circulation. And thinking of circulation in the circle, not as just a circle. Again, we don't want give and take. We want to think about it as a cycle, right? And I say it's not just circulation, because reciprocity isn't just circulation. Circulation is the cycle of things. And I love the concept, and I love this concept, and I use it with LiTup, that there's this cycle of seasons, and there's no real beginning or end to that circle. So it can't, when our brain thinks of circulation as give and take, there's a beginning and end to that circle. Where if we look at it like a season, here we have fall, which is this season where we're realizing our potential. We're coming into this full realization of who we are. And at the same time, we're bearing this fruit that we've created. And as we bear that fruit, within that fruit is the seed. So it's both the fruition and the planting. And then as we go into winter, we'll deepen into the roots of who we are. We're going to talk about that a lot in our next session, this process of the tree. But we go into that deep place, and then in the spring, we get this realization that we work through in the summer to come into the fall again. It's a cycle. It's not a give and take. It's a rhythm that we're all part of. And I love comparing it to day. So if we think of fall as the sunset, winter is that night when things are dark and we don't see. And then when we go into spring, it's that dawn of a new day. And summer is the full light. It's when things become obvious where our work is, so that we can celebrate again with the setting sun. When we can be in that cycle, it was an interesting realization I had. I was working when I worked in the community, it was a spiritual community I worked in, and there was always talk about money. Money is always a hot topic in circulation, it seems. And they talk about, oh, when I buy this or do this, it's kind of like the stimulus concept. I've got to keep the economy going, which then feeds this, which then feeds this. But we had this thing we did when we did our tithes, our offerings to the spiritual organization. And there was a line that said, joyously, I give this gift. And there was a day where it changed for me, where initially I said, joyously, I give this gift, and that gift was the money. And then I realized there was this beautiful thing that the minister at the time did, which was to say, ask for pledge and for tithing for people that were regulars and had been coming for a long time, and not ask it from the new people. And I got it. I got what he was doing. And it was such a beautiful concept to me. So that one day I was sitting there, and as I gave my gift, I thought, when I said joyously, I give this gift, it wasn't about the money. It was about what my money created, about the building it paid for, about the minister's services it paid for, about the music and the experience. And I thought, the gift I'm giving with my money is this experience for the person who doesn't have it. I knew when I joined that community, I didn't have a lot of money. And as I grew and became stronger and had money, I could give that. And I realized, wow, I'm giving this experience to people. And I do give it so joyously. And I gave more and more from that concept of, I want to give this experience to people. My business is still run this way. I still invite people who are new to participate for free. All my first and early classes are free. As people participate for a while, I ask them to help me in providing this free opportunity to others. I don't look at the services I offer as something that requires exchange. The exchange is in the moment where I get to overflow this gift I have, and I get to do it free of charge. But I also get to give. And so I give other people the opportunity to give with me. I give them the opportunity to participate and say, no, I want to make this program available to more people. So I want to participate and give and put value to what I'm giving to myself, so that we are supporting others while investing in ourselves. This is the concept. And so what it came to for me was this, it culminated in this conversation I was having with somebody about giving and receiving. And I'm like, but it's something that's more than that. And finally I landed on, I'm like, I don't want to give and receive. I want to share. I want to share an experience, and I want to bring my full self to it. And if you bring your full self to it, then what we get to share is beautiful, because the value now is in our consciousness and what we bring. So it's no longer about letting go. It's about overflowing. Because if we try to just let go, it will automatically fill, usually with what was there before. We want to be so full we're overflowing. So it's not like I'm going to take something out of myself and get rid of it and then give it with something else, because it can't. It happens simultaneously. The minute you take something out of yourself, there's something else already there. If I have so much within myself, it just overflows, then that changes the dynamic of the situation. It's about breaking free of thinking of life as a roller coaster and realizing, no, it's just a series of moments. Life is just a series of moments. And if I bring myself fully to each moment, how can it be anything but joyful? This concept of this concept that polarity is good and bad is a frustrating concept to me. The concept that says you can't know joy without pain, that's not true. I see babies who are happy. They're not happy because they know pain. Any pain they've experienced, they don't even remember. We don't need to have sorrow to recognize joy. It's the same with that saying about you don't know what you've got till it's gone. That's not true. When I'm in a joyous, peaceful, beautiful experience, I know I'm in that. I don't need to lose it to recognize its value. That's not what polarity is. Polarity, we've talked about, is the fact that there are things out there that aren't us. There are knowledges out there that I don't have. And so everything that's not me is my polarity. That's not what the concept of circulation is about. Circulation is the cycle, like the seasons. It's the in and out breath. I know if I breathe in, I will naturally exhale, and vice versa. If I exhale, I'll breathe in. It's a cycle, like the ocean wave. It's not I give and you give back. It's this circular pattern that says I pull back and flow up and then crash on the shore. I breathe in information and I exhale myself into the world, right? Because nature works in that circle. Reaping what we sow is about our consciousness. It's about the fact that what we put into the world is what we experience. It's about that balance and understanding that real reciprocity in that state, pressure always equalizes. And this is the sentence that's most important, is realizing pressure always equalizes. The path, which means that nature follows the path of least resistance. So we have to look at what is our resistance. Resistance to the new, if we're feeling resistant to the new, that means we're in primal thinking, we're a primate. Life in the evolved mind craves the new. It resists stagnation. It can't sit still. It must move forward, right? And the last thing I want to talk about when it comes to this is the concept of collision. I read this wonderful book called The Dao of Physics. Love this book. It's written by a physicist about the correlation between physics and Eastern traditions. But he was talking about molecular collision, and I knew a lot about that from working with heat transfer and air movement. I actually worked in an industry where I had to have a base understanding of molecular physics, and I understood what molecular collision was. And the cool thing about molecular collision is when it's perfect collision, there's this concept that molecules don't just bounce off each other and change trajectory. If it's a perfect collision, they actually propel off of each other. And so there's this really cool concept I started to think about with people, that when we collide with other people, if we have that place where we've shared, where we've both brought ourselves fully to the situation, then we propel off of each other. I mean, have you had those experiences where you meet someone, you interact with them, and you leave with them full of energy? Those are the collisions that we're talking about. If we are in a state of those collisions all the time, then we will organically propel forward. So I like to think of it as life is this general force within us, within the moment, that is penetrating what is next. So again, I call it a gentle force that is penetrating what is next. So this moment is a gentle force penetrating the next moment. And if we can be in that space where we're fully bringing ourselves, then we fill that room, we overflow. This is, again, when I talk about the empath isn't full enough, so the room fills the empty spaces within the empath. But when we're full, we fill the room. Our presence is felt. And this is the natural effort of nature. This is that being so full that we naturally expand, but our work needs to be in being so full and understanding that if we believe, we will. And so I want to end this week with this concept I came to realize about where I realized, wow, if life is just a series of moments, it's just an unending moment. We're only ever in the moment. And I thought, if I bring myself fully to each moment, how can I be anything but happy? And this thought came to me that I would exist in pure inspiration, never watered down, never teaching, only being. And that I wouldn't just see the beauty in others. I would interact with them at this level always. And that, to me, is natural karma, is natural reciprocity. That's the mirror I want to experience in the world. And the way I experience that is to bring my full self. That's the only thing that can be my responsibility. So we're going to look at that this week. We're going to talk about the mirror. We're going to talk about circulation and this idea of pressure always equalizes and what it means when we're ourselves. So that will be the homework. And I do hope you enjoyed the journey. I will look forward to seeing you again next session.